And we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for another Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. Some of you may recognize me. My name is Chinyelu. I have been a long-term member of the Kepler community. I do a lot of stuff in terms of like marketing and media. I host this sometimes, but today I am not the main person on camera. Today, the main person is Alvin, as he leads our conversation today about CLTs, community land trusts, what they are, how they work, and what we've got going on at Kepra in terms of that. So, yeah, Alvin, I'll pass it to you.
So did you want to start with a check-in of any kind?
Yeah, sounds good. Does anybody have a suggestion for anyone that doesn't know? We always like to start our meetings with a check-in just to see how everybody's doing. We typically do number, color, and then we have an icebreaker question of some sort. So does anybody have a suggestion for a check-in question today?
What's something you feel many people don't know about?
I have a suggestion that is, what is something you feel many people don't know about you? So unless anybody has a better suggestion, I will go ahead and start. I am a green 7 today. That's just the number and the color that I think kind of describes my mood, how I'm feeling. And something that most people don't know about me, I think, I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes. It was a skill that I taught myself during like my last year of high school, I think. So, and I'll pass it to Alvin.
Hey everybody, I'm feeling like electric yellow 7, and something people don't know about me. Okay, so I'll just say that I used to play violin in high school, and I was a very expressive player. So I was like moving around and stuff, so everyone used to make fun of me, but my teacher said, that's how you're supposed to do it. Play with feeling. And I'll pass it to Miss Denise.
Okay, can you hear me? This is not my mood, but this is my new favorite color is brown. And I'm gonna go with the 7. I'm feeling completely perfect, even though things aren't going as well as I would want them to be. And so something no one knows, I am like a master problem solver. I'm always looking at creative problem solving techniques, which sometimes can be scary for people to indulge, but that's me. And I'll pass it to Keith.
Okay, my color today is blue. My number is 17. And something you may not know about me is I grew up in a football family, but I was a soccer player all the way through college. And I will pass it to Jeb.
Hello, everyone. I am a 9 today. Color is red. I tell you that people don't know about me is that Jeb is actually an acronym of my first name and my 2 middle names. And I won't disclose what any of those names are, and we'll save those for a different check-in question. Then I will pass it to the Inglewood team.
That was a really good one, Jeb. I am Joe Bowling with Inglewood CDC. I am a gold 9. And a thing that you may not know about me, I am an NBA basketball fanatic and a Denver Nuggets fan. And so I've had a really good week with the NBA championship for my Denver Nuggets.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Ryan Hayes, I'll orange 8. And something unique. I'm a mountain biker. I'll pass to Judith.
Good afternoon. Let's see, I haven't done this before. Red is my favorite color, so it'll be red. I would say the number, is this like on a scale of 1 to 10, I guess, is maybe 6.5, 7, because I'm baking in the kitchen today and that's not my favorite place to be. And the thing that you may not know about me is that I was a township trustee for 7 years. And I'll pass it to Stephen.
I'm Stephen Meyer. I'm a green 7 today. And a lot of people don't know that I actually have, I studied philosophy in undergrad. So Alvin and Imhotep and I like to sit around and talk philosophy as often as possible. And I will pass it on to Emmanuel Ivy.
All right, hello everyone. What are the questions again, Alvin?
So it's how you're feeling 1 to 10 today. Today, what color would it be? And then one thing that you think most people don't know about you.
Okay. I'm a 12, so I'm beyond the scale right now. We just had our Juneteenth peace walk led by our youth department. So that was great. The color, I'm gonna say black and white. I got my super dad shirt on today, so feeling good too. So I guess that's another reason why I'm at a 12. And then what people may not know about me, well, they call me the grill master. So I love to grill, chicken wings, ribs, vegetables, a little bit of everything I like to grill. So that's who I am. Let me go ahead and give it to, let's say, Aaron Spiegel.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I hate being in a car for a meeting, sorry. I'm a gray 6 today. Let's see, some of you don't know about me. My primary mode of transportation is a bicycle. And I'll pass it along to, man, I hate doing this in a car. Andrew Bradley.
Thanks, everybody. Hi, I'm Andrew Bradley, Policy Director with Prosperity Indiana. Let me say I'm a sky blue 8 today. It was just outside and it's like switching between like gray and blue. So I'll pick the blue. I said I'm an 8, feeling pretty good. And then something people don't know, that the great part reminded me, my first job out of college was with AmeriCorps in far north redwood country of California in Humboldt County, where it's always gray and kind of misty for like 8 months a year. So something not a lot of people know. And let's see, not exactly sure who hasn't gone yet. April?
Peace. Greetings, everyone. Oh, hope you can hear me. My name is Aprile. Good try. There's an extra I at the end. And we are, let's see, teal, like this color, dark teal, like Command Coffee. Shout out to my favorite spot. I'm around the corner. And something you all may not know about me is I also played violin and still love it to this day. I played throughout middle school and a little bit of college. And we will pass it on to Precious Stevenson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Precious Stevenson, as you just said. Today, I would say I am a 10. My favorite color is olive green, and something people don't know about me is I went to a bunch of schools because I grew up with a travel nurse as a mom. So that's it.
Then you
go ahead,
try
Gary.
to
I'm sorry,
pass
Gary
it on to
Warner.
someone.
Hello, I'm a blue 8 today. Something nobody knows about me, that I'm pretty good at basketball. I'm pretty good on the court. Is there one more question? We're good? All right. Kick it to Michael. Is there another Michael? Michael's you.
Hi everyone. I'd say I'm feeling like an 8, but a light blue. Something that people probably don't know about me. I'm an avid skier. I like to ski, so I'm gonna pass it to Nicole Woods.
Here we go.
All righty. Hello, guys. I am a 12, let's say green. And something that no one knows about me, I run 4 businesses here in Indianapolis. I help the youth. I teach them how to plant, grow, and harvest fresh fruits and veggies. And I'm a farmer here in Indianapolis. Let me see if you can see.
Looks beautiful.
So I'm out in my market. We run a market 9 to 5. So, yep, I'm going to pass it along to, let's see. I don't know. I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. Let's say Keith. What about Keith?
I have already gone.
Nicole, we can kick it over to Mrs. Paulette Fair.
Okay, am I off mute? Let's see.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. That means I'm not on mute. Okay, I'm a yellow 10, and what most people wouldn't even guess about me is that I'm about to have a birthday. I'm going to be 80. And I'll pass it to Chin.
I went first.
Oh, okay. Well, will you pass it along to someone?
I'll pass it to LaShonda. Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm LaShonda. I am a gray bluish today. I'm about a 6. Something no one knows about me is that I am a local poker champion in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Who hasn't went? I think is that everybody? Keith, hi Keith. Have you gone?
Hi, LaShonda.
How are you?
Good to hear you again. I'm well. I'm Keith. I'm like an 8 today. I'm green, I guess. And I love bad movies. So good to see new faces. Hi.
Keith, did you pass it to somebody?
Sorry, there's so many
All
people here.
good.
I can't even see. Wave your hand if you haven't gone yet. I came in late. Stephanie, I saw Stephanie wave. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Keith. I'm Stephanie. I am a 9 dark turquoise, kind of greenish turquoise. And something that many of you don't know, Aprilli helped me remember, about a half a lifetime ago, I played viola through middle and high school. And Cassandra, I'll pass it to you. Thanks for the hand raise.
There we go. Hi, my name is Cassandra. Let's see, I am a yellow 1 today. And one thing that people might not know about me is that, well, I love documentaries and I'm currently trying to make one. I forgot to pass it. Let me see. Let me see a person.
I think Cassandra has her hand up.
Oh, did y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, maybe they can't hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So did everyone heard my spiel, or so I'm not sure.
We heard it.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure. And I have to pass it. Let's see. Has Denise gone?
Well, if nobody else is missing their introduction, I think we can pass it back to Alvin for the meat and potatoes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the discussion today. We're going to try and keep it open. And if you didn't get a check-in, feel free to put it into the chat too. So we'd love to hear from you. So we just have a couple of panelists today who are just going to share a little bit about themselves, their journey, and also the work that we're doing in the housing space, and also just in general, the challenge of affordable housing in Indianapolis and beyond Indianapolis. So we just want to get, some of the folks in the room thoughts on what we see as some of the challenges, some of the lessons learned from the work that you're doing, and where you see maybe some opportunities for making some kind of change and for folks in our community. So I will open it up for whoever wants to start it of the panelists. Keith, you want to kick us off? Who are you? What do you do?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you want to kick us off just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of maybe if you had to say, what are some of the things that you're seeing right now in the affordable housing challenge?
Okay. My name is Keith Broadnax. I started my career over 30 years ago at a community development corporation in Muncie, and found a field that I love doing and have been doing this for over 30 years. I moved to Indianapolis in the early 90s, worked for INHP shortly, worked for LIST for about 9 years, and for the last 21 years, have been working for a low-income housing tax credit syndicator called Sanair. Started as an underwriter, and now I'm in a business development role where I oversee all of our investment activities between lending and investments for all of Indiana and all of Illinois. What I have learned, especially since the pandemic, is I have watched us invest in affordable housing in this community, celebrated, and then took a pause, knowing that we probably lost more units than what we just invested in. I went and looked at the escalation of rents in our community, and looked at how median incomes have changed over between 2018 to 2023. The median income for a family of Indianapolis went from like 77,000 to over 99,000, which is like a 29% increase. I watch how when we're looking at affordable housing deals, how we assume rents are going to go up 2%. And what I worry about is that in our current environment, the lack of housing and the fact that I know rents in our community are going up well in excess of the 2% that we project.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Anyone want to add in from the panel or go next?
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
That medium, Mr. Keith, that medium household income was for, what's the family size?
A family of four. So I went back, we always watch this because one of the things that we watch is we watch the trends, because on the deals that we invest in, it tells, since a lot of our properties are restricted by income targets, anywhere from anybody making 30% of area median income to 60% of area median income, shows how much that if we can increase rents or not. So in 2018, the median income for a family of four was $77,200. And for 2023, it's at $99,400, which is a 28.76% increase over what, almost a 6-year period.
Thank you.
And I guess, Keith, I'll ask a couple more follow-up questions, and others from the audience, please feel free to add in some questions. If you had to say what you see as some of the problems driving what's making housing so unaffordable, if you had to pick a few things out, and if you had to think about if you had to make some changes, or if you see any points of leverage for making some kind of improvement in where things are at.
Well, when I started, I was hoping like Joe was going to start, because they're going to have a better ground level view of where Indianapolis is at. I mean, for me, I mean, what I constantly see is that it's been a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive to develop the housing, because the construction costs have gone up on us, interest rates have gone up on us, so it makes it a lot harder for us to start to target the deeper target lower rents that we would like to target.
Thanks, Keith. Well, I'll open it up. Joe or Stephen or Jeb, either of you all want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I don't mind going next. Joe Bowling and Ryan Hayes here with Inglewood. We work for Inglewood Community Development Corporation here on the near east side of Indianapolis. We're a community-based organization. We have been around for about 27 years now, and just try to help out where we can with housing, economic development, comprehensive community development, overwhelmingly just as Inglewood neighbors that live where we work and play and worship, etc. We do a little bit of everything. We certainly do a fair amount of affordable and equitable development of affordable rental properties, particularly with a focus on serving those that are most vulnerable, including chronically homeless populations, etc. We do some home ownership development and work with Alvin and some of the folks here on the Community Land Trust Advisory Board. And I'm very, very excited just about that new tool for our community. And most all of the home ownership that we'll do from this point forward, we certainly intend to develop for the Community Land Trust so that it stays permanently affordable. And then Ryan here works on our homeowner repair program that serves low-income homeowners as well. Everything that we do, we try to serve certainly affordable populations, if not very low income populations, as the median household income in our neighborhood is still right around $30,000. And so it's overwhelmingly a very low income community. Nothing more to add on to what Keith had to say and others, just in terms of the supply and demand imbalances. I mean, I think I've shared on calls like this. we manage about 200 units of affordable rental housing. And for the first time, kind of during COVID, we just had to close our waiting list altogether, because it's up to about a year long in terms of our ability to serve persons with affordable rental housing. And you just hate to give folks false hope by adding their name to a waiting list and then them not do the proper due diligence to find something else. We have 5 multifamily developments under construction right now that total about $65 million worth of construction activity that really will double the amount of affordable rental housing that we have right now. And so we're very excited about that. It keeps us hopping with that much activity around, et cetera, but excited for that and the ways that will serve some new populations, including about 25% of those units for families coming directly out of homelessness. So excited about that. And then certainly we're trying to do as much as we can on the home ownership side, developing for the CLT, et cetera. I don't know, Ryan, anything else to add here?
No, I think you hit on most of it. I said partnering with Joe and Abigail, working on helping develop, along with Kepra, helping at least do the development side for the first phase of the CLT over on Temple Avenue, and along with some projects. So the first 7 townhomes, and then the first 6 units on the duplex side as well, down the pipe here.
The only other thing, Alvin, that I'll say maybe here that could be helpful. I agree so much that we certainly need to ramp up the supply of affordable housing that we create. And I think, as Keith said, we really need to do a better job of preserving the affordable housing that's created and getting toward the end of its kind of protected affordability period, et cetera. But the third thing that I'll mention that I just don't know that folks talk about a whole lot that might be just as important, and that's really just doing what we can to just increase the supply of housing to a certain extent in general, that really will help with some of the supply and demand imbalances. As we increase the just supply of housing, there will kind of be a naturally occurring affordability. And sometimes we really see market rate development perhaps as kind of the enemy because we worry about gentrification, et cetera. But it's not quite that cut and dried. I think the more supply of housing that we have in our community, the more that there will be kind of a naturally occurring affordability that low income folks can really benefit from. And so even though we don't do that kind of market rate housing, I think the more that we can do to create the environment that good quality housing is created, period, there's some real benefits there for low income renters and home buyers that I think sometimes we overlook because we do worry about the effects of displacement and gentrification, and for some very good reasons.
Yeah, I'll echo what Joe said. I think that's exactly right. The naturally occurring affordable housing that was around 5 years ago just isn't. It's been sold to investors. Rents have gone up, and that's the rents for those units have gone up, but it's also put more pressure on the existing affordable housing that is in a program like a HUD program. And I think that we're kind of slow to acknowledge that the real estate market is completely different now than it was 5 years ago. And you're not just competing in the market with other home buyers or other renters. You're also competing with hedge funds that are buying up real estate all around the country indiscriminately. And so, the supply and demand issue that Joe was mentioning, it's partially because of the supply, but it's probably more so because of there is more demand for housing just because there's so much money in the real estate market right now, and it continues. to just flood into markets. And I think, you know, we talk about more funding for affordable housing, and obviously we need a lot more money to solve the affordable housing problem. But I think the other part of it, and I know Andrew's not on this panel, but I might call him out to say, you know, the other thing that we need to be vocal about is the need to look at the policy landscape around housing, and what do we need to do and what do we need to change in order to prevent this kind of rampant investment in real estate from just, and it's already out of control, but like how do we keep it from getting even worse? Like I said, I think we're just very slow to realize that, and I think the communities that do figure this out more quickly are going to be the ones that that are more resilient and are going to be more inclusive, and the ones that don't figure it out are the ones that are going to continue to eat away at what is the community.
So I'd really like to just kind of expand on what Stephen said in terms of the landscape surrounding out-of-state institutional investors, specifically in Marion County. It's a large problem, throughout the state of Indiana, but more so severe in Indianapolis. For those of you who don't know me, I am affiliated with the Indianapolis Land Bank within TIN. So I'm really into the tax foreclosure process and the tax sale processes. And the way that we do tax sale, many of our county commissioners think that it is a process that works because it's able to get those properties back on the tax sale or back on the sort of like tax rolls. But that does not mean that those properties are becoming, a value to the communities that they're in. The Fair Housing Center, and I think Erica from the Fair Housing Center is on this call, but the Fair Housing Center has a fantastic report from last December that really details some of the specific data around this right now. And I think they're coming out with another report before the end of the year with more information about this. But one of the stats that really floored me when I read that report is that I believe it was 50% of all foreclosed property that was sold to out-of-state institutional investors, think in like the 2016 tax sale, have ended back into the 2022 Marion County tax sale. And so what we call those churner properties, right? So they are properties that kind of remain in the state of vacancy and abandonment. And so even though, there's technically somebody who has stepped up to pay, the taxes or any sort of like liens or something like on that property, they're not necessarily back in productive use. In fact, they're actually becoming a larger health and safety hazard for our communities. We've also been doing some work in the neighborhoods we've been working in, doing some research around, who owns what. And something that we found is that, in some of the neighborhoods we're working in, something to the tune of 30% of all residential property is owned by out-of-state investors. These are low-income neighborhoods. These are middle neighborhoods. They're predominantly Black neighborhoods. And so you can kind of get the understanding of, like these properties became vacant and abandoned out of the foreclosure process or the foreclosure crisis, and they're still vacant and abandoned because of the tax sale foreclosure process. And so I think that that issue will continue to exacerbate this problem of affordability, because we have, land that could be developed in places that are in high demand, but we're unable to develop it because they're owned by the mysterious people that come up to tax sale with briefcases, and we don't know where they're from.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that a little bit too. So we also were looking at the Far East Side, and some of the things that we found, there were 10 out-of-state investors that owned at least 100 properties. And so that's new money coming in and buying houses that were not otherwise buying real estate in Indianapolis before. But that's not the only way that they are distorting the market. They have subsidiaries, and they just sell their properties to their own subsidiaries for a little bit more money each time, driving up the prices, the comps in the neighborhood. And they do this on a grand scale. And so they may have overpaid for a property when they bought it, but they're manipulating the market just by the volume that they have and can control. And they're not arm's length transactions. They're essentially selling the house to themselves, but for no other reason than to drive up prices because they've overpaid for their properties. And so it's, it is, it's a nefarious problem, and it's a subtle problem that you don't see. Again, it's one of those things that we have to get out in front of, because it is really affecting especially homeowners, but even renters as well, because if you can't get a home, then you have no choice but to rent. And so landlords can drive up prices because you don't have another choice. So it's kind of a negative feedback loop, I think is what they call it. So yeah, it is an expansive problem for sure.
Thanks, Stephen and Jeb. And I'll add in and introduce myself too. So I'm Alvin with Kepler Institute. Been with Kepler about 11 years and primarily focus on our affordable housing stuff, including organizing the community land trust work here, which I put a link to in the chat if you want to learn more about. But one of the really valuable things in my journey to trying to wrap my brain around this insidious problem around housing has been just understanding the history and really understanding that housing is really just an extension of the larger history and economy and economic conditions that are really underlie the modern world, like the global economic sphere that have emerged after colonialism and the rise of the West. And I would say for me, there are a couple of books that I've read that help connect the dots. In particular, Born in Blackness by Howard French, which really talks about the role of trade with Africa, first in gold and then in enslaved Africans, and how that and the plantation economy was really the basis for Europe rising from really kind of a backwater of the world that had like limited resources, like natural resources, to really the economic superpower through basically colonialism and using that labor first through sugar and then through cotton, and then from that plantation economy to an industrial economy. And really also the role that race and how discrimination based on race in who could own land, who could buy what, who had access to financing, who had access to government programs like the GI Bill, the Federal Housing Administration, and the massive wealth inequality that resulted from that discrimination. I think there are other books like The Color of Law, which is another example of looking at how the government intentionally increased segregation, both through public housing and through its housing policies, which were primarily focused on subsidizing home ownership as really their Cold War strategy to get people invested in the economic system of capitalism and private property ownership. And so again, all that to say, like, I would say that there is a very fundamentally deep racial line that is kind of based in kind of a racial caste hierarchy that is not exclusively just about race. There are others, there are folks who are not Black or poor white folks who also are exploited in the same system. But at the same time, it really is about taking the wealth from those who don't have it, like the folks who are at the bottom of the hierarchy, and moving it and concentrating it toward the top of the hierarchy, which I think Stephen demonstrated with that idea of people who have money can then manipulate the system to make their money grow without really doing any labor. It's just they're manipulating money and real estate to produce quote unquote wealth, financial wealth, which is really speculation. So like, I guess for me, and again, that's a lot of doom and gloom, which really says that, you know, fundamentally, if we want to fix the housing problem, we have to fix much deeper social, economic, philosophical, even spiritual ideas of how we relate to each other in our community. But again, like there's also, along with that history of exploitation, there's a history of resistance and collaboration and cooperation, where communities have worked together to survive and thrive, even in challenging positions, even in challenging circumstances, whether that's pulling their resources to form cooperatives, or just working together to keep each other safe in their community and build a local economy. So that's kind of, for me, like that's kind of for our work at Kepra, is just trying to explore with you all on the call how we build a deeper understanding through sharing knowledge and information, and whether then we can find ways that we can work together and leverage resources to bring needed resources into our community.
See, you said the word philosophy, and now Imhotep's standing right behind you.
What's up? I like philosophy.
So I'll step out of my comfort zone for a second and say something optimistic. You know, echoing Alvin, there's kind of widespread understanding about how race has affected real estate specifically, but wealth more broadly. I think, and that's great. I think that's it's, as Alvin said, important to understand the history. I think we're also kind of getting to the next step of saying, okay, people are pretty familiar with the concept of redlining and the history behind it. The next step is, what are we doing that 50 years from now, people will be saying, that's redlining of 2023, you know, and starting to examine, you know, what it is that we are all doing, whether consciously or not, that is facilitating these discriminatory practices or outcomes. So I think that's kind of the next step. But then the other reason that I think I'm optimistic is because there are more conversations going on about how fundamental housing is to community, to health, to equity and fairness. And that's a new conversation that just wasn't really commonplace even 5 years ago. And that's important in and of itself. And it's kind of the interesting philosophical or spiritual background. But why that makes me optimistic is because when people start to understand that and talk freely about that, that's when policy changes. And that's when politicians decide to actually put more money into solutions to these problems. And I do think that that there are policymakers who, they may not fully understand the scope of the problem, but they know it's a huge problem and they know that it's going to take money. And I think more so than ever, they're open to that concept that we need to spend money on housing. And it's not just housing, it's a lot of other things as well. I mean, even like Todd Young he's been sponsoring several different bills at the federal level to increase the supply and affordability of housing. So you know, it's a big problem that took a long time to happen. So we have to be patient, but we also need to continue to talk about it to everybody who will listen.
Thanks, Stephen. I think we did have a message. Oh, Beth, go ahead. You had a question.
Hi, not so much a question, but from the gentleman that spoke with regard to the 10 companies that are selling within themselves, I mean, it sounds like a modern day Ponzi scheme and harks back to funds that were like mortgage-backed securities that made the fall of the savings and loan. I don't know how many years ago was that. At least 20, well, not 20, but maybe 18. So what are out there in the world, the policy changes that we should be asking for? I mean, I understand that the policy is what we maybe should gear, and I'm happy to hear that Senator Young is making him some headways, but it sounds like we should best be doing something here locally sooner than later. Tell me what the policy change should be to get this nefarious dealing that is just not engendering community at all. In fact, it's the demise of it.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll jump in. Again, I'm Andrew Bradley, Policy Director with Prosperity Indiana, and thanks for the shout out, Stephen. This is some of the work that we do all the time. And in the chat, my colleague Hale has already put a link in. I think that would be a great next step, is if anybody wants to engage on this policy advocacy effort, especially at the state and also federal level, please do sign up, because there's a whole, world ongoing that we have there. And, without getting into every single advocacy alert that's on the table right now, we just finished with the state session, and something that I'll say, it very much reflects what Stephen just said, is like our state legislators have come to a place where they recognize that housing is an issue. But right now they fall back on, well, let's incentivize market rate, already profitable development. And to Joe's comments earlier, it is true, more supply is helpful for sure. However, we're not going to build our way out of Indiana's housing affordability crisis. And actually just yesterday, my organization, partnering with the National Low Income Housing, just put out a new report that finds that statewide, you have to make $19 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. And in Indianapolis, it's more like $20.48. And obviously, the average renter, and we have this is part of that report, the renter household doesn't make that much. And while rents have increased by 12% over the past year statewide, the wages have only gone up about 7.5% on average. So, there's a bigger picture there. We can't just build new market housing. We do need to look at preservation. That's come up in this conversation. And to me, preservation means, keeping people in the homes that they already have. It means the expiring low-income housing tax credits that we're talking about. I think it's also preservation of housing stock by not allowing some of these out-of-state corporate investors to buy them out, drain out the value, charge full rent, and then skip town. And so we had, throughout this past session, there were several issues that are on the table, but our state legislators aren't yet at a place where they're willing to look at that. So really encourage you to join our coalition and be part of those conversations. I will drop a link to that new report, but other than that, I'm going to step back because I'm mostly here to listen today.
Thanks, Andrew.
I would like to add in one other thing to Alvin, just for consideration, because finding affordable housing for people with disabilities is also challenging. And as I've developed less and less mobility over the last 5-6 years, we actually had to move out of our house that was 2-story because I couldn't any longer climb the 19 stairs safely and successfully alone. But looking for housing where my children could still be with me. I still have a teenage daughter, but my older son came to make sure that whatever my needs were physically, I would have that support. And finding homes with a first floor bedroom that still accommodated children was a challenge. And even if there is a first floor bathroom, it usually was just a half bath or something set up for no consideration for anyone with any type of physical limitations. So I would hope that across these messages for affordable housing, we look at people who have a family member who is disabled. I couldn't just go into senior housing because I still had children at home, minor children at that. So I just want to throw that out there for all the policy conversations so that we become sensitive. Couldn't find that. And then I'll also let you know that the housing search for rentals have changed so much. There used to be a time you could call up someone, ask about the apartment or the house they have for rent, and you could get, a walkthrough and they do a little background check. Now they played the fee game. They made more money not renting by collecting fees on every applicant than making it a possible rental. I need someone to look at how many homes are still on the market. No one can tell me these houses can't find a qualified candidate and it just sits on the market for 2 years while they collect $50, $65 per person per house. And I know some of those houses that are still sitting empty now, even months later. So I just want to add that for consideration in the policy also.
Thanks, Ms. Denise. Those are great points. And I would just add into the policy piece that touches on the rights of tenants. Is an important pillar of that. Another one, and this has been said, I think I heard this on another call I was on, they basically, the parallel is anyone who has a mortgage is living in subsidized housing because the government insures and subsidizes 30-year mortgages. There's only one other country in the world that does 30-year fixed rate mortgages, which is the Netherlands. And the Times article that I put in the chat kind of looks at why does the US have this, specifically, what are the problems in the US with the housing market versus other places in the world? And of course, other places in the world also have problems with housing. But it kind of looked at Vienna, Austria, and how they made different policy decisions that created different results, where people, instead of paying over 35, 40%, 50% of their income on housing, there are people who pay 2 or 3% and 6%, 8%, that's more like typical than, or 18%, something around there, because of their investment and subsidy of construction versus subsidy of the financing and subsidy toward banks to finance the housing. So I do think that so that's one thing, which is the subsidizing mortgages. Also, the mortgage tax deduction, I think, is like double or triple what HUD spends on like public housing or affordable housing, like that mortgage tax deduction, which for people who are wealthy enough to itemize their taxes, like that, those are the people who get that tax break from not paying interest on, and the bigger the mortgage, the bigger the tax break too. So it's kind of like a reverse like taxation, where like the rich get a bigger break than folks. So I guess there are people would say that it's kind of a market, like we are a free market, but it really isn't a free market because it's subsidizing those who have more, because of those people having more political clout and influence to be able to keep those laws in place, both keeping protections for renters from coming up, because a lot of people who have power also own properties and or are connected to like folks who own real estate, have influence on politics too. So does anyone else want to add anything on policies?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about almost probably 95% of housing, especially single family housing, is subsidized in one way or another. And part of the reason that there are two different systems is you may have noticed maybe a month ago, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac announced that they were changing how they priced the agency mortgages, and there were all kinds of articles that hit the business journalism, and some of them hit like regular outlets as well, about like how people with higher credit scores were going to be subsidizing people with lower credit scores, and that's how it was reported. But that's not really what they did. What they did was they decided that they weren't going to subsidize second houses as steeply as they had been in the past. And it was reported as if middle and high income people were going to be subsidizing low income people's mortgages. But really what was happening was people who could afford to have two houses weren't going to get as much subsidy as they had gotten in the past. But that's not how it was reported. And I think that's a really good point, Alvin, that the affordable housing is subsidized very overtly. And this is affordable housing. Market rate housing is subsidized very subtly. And it's done through banks, it's done through agencies. And so you don't see it the way that you see it as HUD's line item in the federal budget. And I just think that's a very interesting dichotomy there between everybody's getting their housing subsidized. It's just different ways.
Mr. Odell, go for it.
I have a question, if I may ask.
Sure. Why don't we go, Sam Odell, you had your hand up, then we'll go to Judith.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to share, I think another reason why this problem persists is similar to the reason why, generally poverty persists in, the richest country in the world. And it's because if you think about a capitalistic democracy, there are 7 things that you have to have with fidelity. And somebody might argue there's 6 or there's 8 or whatever, but there are a grouping of things that you have to have with fidelity in order to be successful in a capitalistic democratic society. And what happens is that many of us, the largest percentage, we get them, those things with fidelity. A lot of it by birthright. We're born into the right circumstances, so we get those 7 things. But then there are other people who are not born into the circumstance that automatically gives them those 7 things. But then all of us as good-hearted people, and all the reasons why racism in the past and colonialism, all those things are true, but that cause that. But the reason why we don't solve some of these issues and help our fellow citizens rise out of poverty and rise out of the housing crisis is because we don't go after the issue in a systemic way. We don't try to make sure all 7 of these things are addressed in a household so that people can sustain themselves. We try to deal with food insecurity all by itself. We try to deal with healthcare and health all by itself. We're going to solve it. We try to deal with the absence of social capital all by itself, and we try to deal with education, poor quality schools all by themselves, and we're going to address that. And then we try to deal with housing, and then there are other things too. But until we get a systemic approach to how we address those disadvantaged in our society, I'm afraid that we're going to just keep spinning our wheels, going after one thing or the other. If we had a magic wand, if we could take everybody who doesn't have an affordable house and magically we could give them an affordable house, in probably 5 years, we'd be right back to where we are, because they would have lost the house, something would have happened, it wouldn't maintained or whatever, because we don't address all of the issues systemically. And so I just bring that up as something to think about, because all of us obviously care about this issue. But for all of us to start thinking systemically about this and not thinking, I know I'm going to solve housing. No, we're not. We're not going to solve housing until we address all of the issues that cause households to be unsuccessful.
Mr. Odell, that's an excellent point. So before we go to Judith, I will open it up for reactions or comments, thoughts.
Did you open that up to me?
Well, if you have a thought on that before we go to your question, just
okay.
any reactions or thoughts on that?
I'll react a little bit. Sam, I think that was really well said, and I appreciate that very much. I'd be curious, kind of where you got your list of 7, or kind of what sources you have there, just for my own reading. But very well said. I was just going to say that I mean, I think for our work over the last 25 years, we provide affordable rental housing to families that are very low income, and some moving out of homelessness, and sometimes that really can be like an income support to the tune of $10,000 a year to families. And you might say to yourself, well, we have kind of solved their housing situation. Why are they not able to climb out of poverty? And I think it kind of gets to what Sam said there. It's more than housing. We can't do this work in silos. There have to be comprehensive systemic approaches. And so that's why a lot of us do care about comprehensive community development, as I mentioned earlier, and try to do that as a community from kind of the grassroots up, et cetera. But man, it is tricky work, and the barriers and the burdens that are laid down on folks that weren't born with all of these things are very difficult to build, as I think everyone recognizes. But appreciate that, Sam, very much.
And I'll ditto. I mean, I think that for us, like, we just see housing is just one tool and one piece of the puzzle. And I think in relation to Aaron's question earlier, where do you go from acknowledging like racial inequalities and this like really broken system that we have been born into, which is like to, I guess for me, roll up our sleeves and rethink our relationships to each other. And that is about more than just fixing the material food individually, but more that these unequal systems come out of separation from each other, and even some deeper societal norms and beliefs that have just been so ingrained that we've come to think of it as how the world works. Whereas I think if we can build relationships with each other and find ways to relate across those barriers, boundaries of race, class, gender, etc., then there is something possible that we can create. It may not be perfect, and it's surely not going to be perfect. Again, for me, it's not necessarily about arriving at the utopia of having all these things fixed, but connecting to that historic memory of working together to survive and thrive, and to push the ball just a little further toward the kind of community and world we want to live in.
Alvin, I wanted to comment and respond also.
Sure, go for it.
So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here, and wanted to just mention a little bit about language in terms of what we were hearing, and we use "we" as my personal pronoun from Sam and Joe and everyone. I just wanted to say that when we're talking about people who were not born in, I guess, the most favorable circumstances in regards to this country, I just kept hearing lots of word or verbiage that that I felt described me. And so, like, I think it's also important to kind of just, I often try to I guess, for lack of a less cliche word or phrase, read the room, or try and like acknowledge who is present. And so when I hear, just words like they and, us versus them and things of that sort, just constantly like these people will, and I'm not saying that I heard the phrase these people, but that's the, just kind of tone or impression that was left upon me. These people will end up without a house after 5 years, or someone mentioned offering $10,000 and things of that sort, and that doesn't fix the problem, and we need to come into this problem-solving initiative more holistically. I guess I just wanted to share that, like, I really appreciate hearing the focus on attacking this issue from many different angles, maybe even 7 angles. And also wanted to just say that, like, I hear myself being spoken about, like, often, as one who is openly and I would say openly neurodivergent. I express very often and try and advocate for those who are neurodivergent and disabled, and also in terms of finances and things of that sort. I've seen a number of different levels of finances and just the different I guess environments I have transpired. So I just wanted to share a little bit of what was coming up for me in terms of this idea that, we're, I guess, about 20 or 30 of us at this point, and we're talking about an issue that may very well be affecting some of us in this room. So for whatever that's worth, I see a lot of different expressions on people's faces, but I wanted to say thanks again, and I just hope that we can maybe revisit our language.
Thank you, Aprilli. Appreciate your contribution for sure. Very important. I'll go ahead and pass to Judith with your question or contribution.
Well, yes, I did, but just thinking about what Sam said, it just, I think my color and my numbers changed throughout listening to all of that, because it seems like there's so many nonprofits all trying to do the same thing, Sam, and I've often wondered why somehow it couldn't all be combined. It just seems like there's money flowing so many different ways, and it does make me feel like there's got to be a better way. I don't know what it is. I mean, that wasn't what I had on my mind when I raised my hand to speak, but your comments certainly got me to revisiting things that I've thought about before. So I appreciated what you had to say. What I wanted to ask and address this to the panel at large that's here today, since you all deal with affordable housing. I live in the Old South Side, and it seems as though every house that has gone on the market has been purchased and turned into a short-term rental. And I have felt for a long time that this is certainly contributing to the shortage of affordable housing. I did go to all the housing task force meetings last fall. I'm retired from the Indiana Senate, so I kind of know how things work there. And I did happen to be back there this session just to work for session as the receptionist, which was fun, but I just didn't feel like that housing task force really addressed some of the issues that we that live here in the city felt was going to help. And so with every property, it seems like, coming on the market here in the downtown area being turned into an Airbnb or a VRBO, we're becoming a neighborhood without neighbors. And I'm just wondering, with this shortage in affordable housing, how this panel has felt like that might be some of the contributing factors. Stephen, Joe.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. And I think, you know, some of those are individuals buying these houses to have rental income. Largely, it is institutional buyers buying them. But I think this gets back to like the broad need for policy changes. So, you know, everything from tenants' rights to building code enforcement to things like the tax structure around real estate. You know, if we want to stop people from investing a bunch of money into something, you have to make it less profitable for them. And so that means at the state level, raising property taxes for commercial real estate that's used for these purposes. And then on the federal level, changing the IRS tax code so that you can't, you know, essentially lower your income tax by putting all your money into real estate, which is what people do. And there's no one solution to these problems. It is there are a lot of ways that the system is set up to benefit people with money to make more money off of real estate. And there's a lot of it going on right now. And we just see the effects of it. And we're probably just starting to see the effects of it. So I completely agree. And I think that a housing task force has to be thinking about all of these things, not just, you know, not just where can we put more money into affordable housing programs. So that's one piece of it, but like, how do we change the system to have the outcomes that we want to see?
Well, the city of Indianapolis currently doesn't even have an ordinance addressing short-term rentals. And we are in the process of getting that done. And the city's been very cooperative. And there are two counselors, Christian Jones and Zach Adamson, that's heading up that drive to get an ordinance in place. The state of Indiana put some restrictions on what local government can do. But there are some things in that legislation that was put into place in 2018 that will allow us to do certain things like require permit. We've had several meetings of downtown neighborhoods, well, Marion County neighborhoods. It was a citywide meetings where priorities were listed of what neighborhoods would like to see. So, so we feel like there's some headway, that we're making some headway with the issue. But I just wondered, since you all deal in affordable housing, if that had been part of your conversations at all.
If I may, I kind of see the land trust as being sort of one of those answers to those challenges. You know, I think that I'm on the CLT advisory board, so probably just gonna talk about it a little bit, but I definitely think that the CLT is a fantastic way to help better connect our nonprofit network here in Indianapolis and empower the Indianapolis community, not just, you know, the organizations that are the backbone of you know, affordable housing development, but really I see the CLT as a fantastic way for, you know, Indianapolis residents to be engaged in the affordable housing discussion. And I also think that it answers, maybe not on a huge scale, but on an impactful scale, the issues that we've been talking here today about, rising rents, out-of-state investors, and it allows the Indianapolis community to actually hold on to that land and help, people in Indianapolis and people in the Indianapolis community make decisions about what happens to that land. And so, while it's tangential, maybe, I definitely think that, the land trust will help rise to the occasion to some of those challenges.
It's my understanding that CDCs have first choice of those properties. Is that right, Jeb?
So I think that you might be referring to the tax sale. And so there was a new program for the tax sale this year where if there was, I believe it was properties that were not bid on the previous tax sale, if they were sort of like churner properties that did not end up in the land bank, then nonprofit affordable housing developers had a first look bid option for those. But for the large tax sale of 2,000 plus properties, the CDCs were not permitted. We're at the same playing field as every other institutional investor, corporate organization, developer. It's just an open bid process still.
Yeah, and I put it in the chat a link to the Community Land Trust webpage that has a little information about what it is and the project that we're trying to put together with some of the partners who are on the call today and other residents. So, and I'll just say very briefly, a Community Land Trust, there's about 300 around the country in different cities. And only just this year are there a couple starting in Indiana, including in Indianapolis. So a Community Land Trust is a nonprofit organization where basically land is collectively owned and stewarded by the Community Land Trust, but usually it's for affordable housing and permanently affordable housing. So people can purchase houses that are on the Community Land Trust land that is then restricts the resale. So if they buy it for $100,000 now, it goes up 2% every year. So instead of buying it today for $100,000, and then 2 years later it's worth $300,000, they sell it for $300,000, which is great for that individual person, but for the neighborhood and for the community that wants to have a stable community with housing for families, that it's not as good for the community as a whole, and you lose housing, because that's kind of been some of the model with community development has been, you invest in neighborhoods, but then, it's good for that one family, but in the future, you don't have that affordable housing. It's gone because it's now on the market. So that's kind of the project that we're starting up here. We still have a whole lot to figure out on exactly what it's going to look like, which is going to be highly informed by folks like you all who are going to be engaged in the process. So again, we're rolling that out sometime between now and the end of the year, and are doing our first projects that Inglewood is constructing some CLT homes that are going to go into the Community Land Trust by the end of this year or next year or so. So if you'd like to learn more, the web link is in the chat, and there's also a form on there if you want to get involved and get on our email list to get updates as we go. We'd love to hear from you and also learn all the things that you know too.
Is it possible for the things in the links in the chat be transferred to an email? Because as soon as this is over, that information goes away. Is that right?
That is correct. So you can save the chat, and we can also save it, try and save it, but I'm trying to think if there's a way. If you press the, where you're going to the chat to type in the message, and you press the dot next to the smiley face, you might be able to save the chat. Okay, and then it'll save it onto a folder for you. Okay, George, glad you could join us. He had a question, a comment regarding, clearly the panelists understand the issues and collaborate on several things. Regarding Judith's points, have groups in this focus area considered forming a coalition to maximize their skill sets for policy change and realistic solutions? Just curious.
Is it just me left?
Me, Keith, and or if Andrew wants to jump in with more of the statewide efforts too.
I mean, I'll say, to be fair, like the short-term rentals hasn't been a top, centering priority, but in part that's because the people involved in the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition to date and Prosperity Indiana members haven't raised that up. But if people join both of those and elevate that particular issue, that may be a way to center that more. But we're definitely looking at, especially housing, supply, access, and affordability and stability. Like those are kind of the guiding lights of those broad efforts, and there's a lot within each of those. So really do once again encourage people to join that. There's federal things that are on the table now. I just don't want to take the time to run through all those, and I don't have the links up to read them through. And I think again, this is not a place to do the download of what just happened in the past state legislative session, but we're already gearing up. We have plans to go through the state. We're going to do some barnstorming to try to reach some of those legislators, because as folks in this call likely know, political power in Indiana is not, it's explicitly concentrated outside of Indianapolis. And so we need to use the energy that we have within the Indianapolis area to map our contacts and then reach those folks. And that's the process we're going through right now.
Yeah, and George, I put in the chat what Haley had put in earlier with a link to that Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition. And I'll just add in that the efforts to organize the CLT came out of the Homes for All Indy Coalition, which was a group of partners who've just been meeting once a month on Zoom just to figure out if there are ways we can work together and how to put together the CLT project and beyond. And yeah, and that came also out of an effort on the Near East side of some folks who were meeting together to think through the same thing about how to start a community land trust. But I do think that better cooperation would probably also be good as we find ways to fit together the different pieces.
Real quick, it's 4:25. So we're almost at time. We've got just about 5 minutes. So maybe if we can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions and wrap it up for the day. If there are any, of course. It's been a very thorough conversation. If there are no more questions, maybe our remaining panelists have some words or some information they'd like to leave with us.
Keith, as we've heard, this is more than a housing issue. Someone making minimum wage doesn't even make enough to afford a 30% unit, which from me being an investor doesn't even pay operating expenses for that development. So it's bigger than just an affordable housing issue.
I've really appreciated all the conversation and comments today from all of y'all. I've certainly learned a fair amount from many of you. I really appreciate the work that Andrew and Prosperity does, and as a small not-for-profit like Inglewood, we try to stay pretty busy, but we can't stay on top of all the advocacy and the different bills that are floated, et cetera, and really appreciate the fact that they do, and we're proud to be member organizations of that network. And again, just we'll try to keep
going with the CLT and other ways, as Alvin said, that we can work more closely together. Judith, I hear you. It seems like there's a lot of folks that are doing different nonprofit activities that aren't very well networked together, and I think that's the importance of spaces like this and networks like Prosperity, where we are better networked together and our voices are kind of combined together. So yeah, appreciate the conversation and appreciate all y'all are doing.
Alvin, I sent the thoughts on the 7 issues to Adisa's email, and so if you could get it and share it with the group, I'd appreciate being included in future conversations and trying to see how we create a big enough community table that we can address all the issues in a comprehensive way, different organizations, but in a comprehensive way, so we can see some generational impact on poverty and affordable housing.
Thanks, Mr. Odell. Appreciate it. I'll make sure that gets out to the group too. And George, great question. Next steps as we keep coming back together. And it's a hard question. And we'll be sure to have more of these conversations too. I will put in the chat, there is a book study and kind of where we've been discussing some of these other issues. We'll have another discussion on June 20th from 5 to 6 p.m. if you want to join on Zoom too, about the 2 articles that were in our newsletter this week. And there's links to them in the registration link too. So if you want to join us, see you then.
All right. One more time, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for coming in and speaking today. I'd like to thank everybody who came and watched and participated in the conversation. Shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder for letting us stream to their platform as well. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll see you next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah.